You know, if you were to tell a group of military personnel to secure this building, I think you'd end up with some different outcomes. The Army would post guards all around the building. The Navy would turn out the lights and close the doors and lock the doors. The Marine Corps would kill everybody inside and set up a command post. And the Air Force would take out a 5-year lease with option to buy. So we do have some differences. Vets4Energy is a group of grassroots volunteers dedicated to ensuring that this nation has sound energy and economic policy that will lead to national security. They're tied together. Now, I'm going to tell you a story from my past experience that kind of highlights, I think, a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish. In 1987, I was in the Gulf of Oman on the USS Constellation, and we were involved in an operation called Earnest Will. Anybody remember that? The Iranians were mining the Persian Gulf. Why was that? Well, they were at war with Iraq. They had been for several years. And Iraq had asked Kuwait to do some tanking for them. They were kind of landlocked. Some of their pipelines had been destroyed. So they wanted to try and sell some oil to pay for their war expenses. Kuwait started doing that, and the Iranians started attacking the Kuwaiti tankers and mining the Persian Gulf. Then Kuwait asked the United States of America, an ally, to come help them out. So I was young then. I'm just over there flying an F-14 thinking, hey, this is great. Maybe I get to shoot down an Iranian. Of course, they are quite cowardly. They never launched one single airplane anywhere, even within their own country while we were flying there. That's a whole nother story. So, long story short, after about a year and a half, we've cleared out the mines, and there had been some casualties. There had been plenty of injuries. We had had some of our own ships, and ships that we had reflagged, Kuwaiti tankers, we reflagged and had our personnel on them. We'd had some injuries when hitting mines. So, at the end of all of that, I thought to myself, why are we over fighting for oil that we don't need? And especially oil that maybe wasn't even coming to us. Why do we have to put ourselves in harm's way for that? Well, the last several years, there's been an economic boom in North Dakota and Canada with shale oil, sand oil. In reality, we don't need any of that oil at all. So a few years ago, I was in the office of a prominent U.S. senator and talking with his chief of staff and a couple other staff members. And I related this story and said, why do we fight for oil that we don't need? Why do we have to put ourselves in harm's way? Why don't we ensure that our economic security in this nation is such that we have better national security? And the answer was, I was stunned. And I've had a few years to think about it, and I've come up with an answer, but he said, we'll still go over and fight for that oil because our allies need it. I was really surprised. I didn't know what to say. I said, well, I don't like that answer. Well, we now have developed enough oil in the U.S., and we have oil reserves that we're not tapping into that we could actually supply our allies as well. Now, does that mean we would never go over and support allies in some kind of a conflict? I think the chance of us having to get involved in something like Operation Earnest Will decreases tremendously. If that Kuwaiti oil or that Iraqi oil was going to Japan or somewhere in Europe, but the Europeans and Japanese are now buying their oil from us, why should we let countries like Iran, Russia, and Venezuela sell oil to our allies when we could sell oil to them? So, that's my answer. We have the ability to do that, to not only secure our nation and our energy ability, but that of our allies. So we have some key points that we like to focus on at Vets4Energy. First one is we need to open areas around the country, particularly offshore, to drill for oil. Did you know that 87% of the federal offshore waters, we can't even look for oil, let alone drill? We need to change that because there may be a lot more oil. There are experts that seem to believe there's more oil there than anybody can imagine. Next, we need to start exporting oil. Remember I talked about that, exporting to our allies. Well, we just passed an omnibus bill that allows us to do that now. For a long time, we could only export to Canada. Canada's not buying oil from us. They want to sell us oil. In fact, they're selling us a lot of oil. And that brings up the Keystone Pipeline. We need to finish the Keystone Pipeline. Did you know that we already have millions of miles of oil pipeline across North America, Canada and the US? Keystone Pipeline is just a small part of that. And the worry was always, well, we're just going to sell that oil when it gets down to Port Arthur in Texas. Yeah, to our allies. How about that? So they don't have to buy from Russia and Venezuela and Iran and Saudi Arabia and anybody else in the Middle East. Fracturing has gotten a bad rap. We've been doing fracturing for 70 years. Did you know that? 70 years of fracturing, and the technology's just gotten better and better and better. Now, there are lots of things we can discuss about this, but the bottom line is national security cannot be separated from economic policy, good economic policy, and good energy policy. One last thing, Vets4Energy is all about all types of energy because we're focused on national security. So whether it's wind, solar, nuclear, hydro, bio, you name it, if that energy will help make us more secure, we're all for it. I don't know how well all of you know the Colonel. I'm really impressed with what he's done here. I have to say, some years ago, I was involved in a few different political campaigns, and I will tell you this and this was over in the Orlando area. If the vets in that area, and I know there are a lot of vets here, all came together like this and decided, we want to make some changes. We don't like the way the VA hospital is being run. We don't like this, we don't like that. Guess what? You're the largest special interest group, period. If you all came together, you would get laws changed, people elected that support veterans' issues and national security. Guaranteed. You cannot lose. I ran the numbers back then on a couple of those campaigns. You cannot lose if you all come together. And it doesn't have to just be about anything political. It can be about anything you want to change in this city, in this county, in this state, to make it a better place, in this nation. Veterans can make a difference if we will all come together. And in our own little local groups, whether it's a VFW or a Legion or whatever else, we do some good things very locally, but collectively we can do a lot. So I salute you, Colonel, for the effort that you're making and trying to make people more aware of a variety of different issues. And finally, I want to salute all of you again for your service, your continued service. The fact that you're here, you're still active and concerned about veterans' issues in your country. And lastly, those men and women still serving in uniform today around the world, God bless them and God bless America. Thank you.